Hi, it's you and Ellery here, and in this channel what I'm aiming to do is really show you through the progress that I'm making with developing a bunch of new bonsai. So a lot of these are from pre-bonsai, and I show you a range of strategies in which you can start to create your own bonsai for cheap, but also through bonsai that you've bought. Now in this video what I'm going to be developing is a new bonsai out of this Bougainvillea bush that I bought, and I bought this one from Coles. So this was a nursery grown bonsai or Bougainvillea bush. Now another thing that I'm going to go through with you today in this video is how I propagated this ficus leaf. So I'm not 100% sure what type of ficus this leaf is from. It is a ficus that I bought in my very first bonsai back in April of 2020. So we'll have a look and see how it goes, but basically what I've done is I've taken off one of the leaves and I've just stuck it in this little shot glass full of water, and I've had it sitting in there on my kitchen sink for 2 months. So it was probably about mid-April that I took that, and it's currently the 10th of July 2020, so it's taken 2 months, and you can now see this little root that's starting to come out the bottom of this leaf. So I'll go through potting this ficus leaf and then how I develop my Bougainvillea bonsai. To pot my new ficus bonsai, what I'm going to do is just put it in this tiny little training pot. I could put it in a bonsai pot, I do have a few here today, but I'm just going to put it in this tiny little training bonsai just to get a little bit larger, and then hopefully I can put it into a larger trading pot later on and see how big I want to get this bonsai first. The other bonsai that I have, which I propagated this leaf from, is my little root over rock bonsai, and that's pretty small, so hopefully I'm going to grow this bonsai up to be a much larger bonsai, which I'll then cut down to be still a large bonsai tree. So the first thing that I would do when getting a normal pot for a bonsai is check the draining holes in the bottom. So you can see in this pot, because it is just a seedling pot, the draining holes are very small, so I don't actually need to cover them up. But I'll go over with you later, while I'm developing my Bougainvillea bonsai, how I actually go through the process of filling up those drainage holes or covering them up so you don't lose the soil from your pot. But with such a small drainage holes as you can see in this pot, there's not really much point in covering it up. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in my bonsai soil. Now for this leaf, which is very young plant, only really got one main root that it's growing off now, so I really want a nice and fine soil, but also a fine soil with a lot of nutrients. So what I've got is my normal soiling mix, which I'm going to fill this up with now. So the mix that I have that I actually fill this up with, it's about even parts. So it's got one part just your standard potting mix, which is mostly bark in it, and other than that it's got a lot of peat and it's got a lot of vermiculite, so it's about even parts those three, and then I've thrown in some extra just your standard peat moss in there as well, just to help with rootings and so forth. So it's a very well draining mix, but it's also got a lot of fine material in there, such as your bark and also your moss. So all of that really helps to keep it well draining, a lot of water retention, but also it's got enough little finer bits in there that the roots won't be too exposed to any air. So it'd be good for this young tree. So this is a common mix that I do use, and for some of my other bonsai I would definitely filter out a lot of the finer products, but for seedlings it's definitely fine with this. So all I'm going to do is put this leaf that's been germinated into this little pot, cover it with soil, and then I'm going to water it and put it in a sunny area. Now for the first couple of days I'm going to leave it out of direct sunlight, and I'll probably leave it in a bit of an area that only gets about 2 to 4 hours of sunlight a day, just for it to start getting healthy. And once we come properly into spring, then I'll probably put it out somewhere where it can get more sunlight. So here we have our new little ficus bonsai. Alright, so now to start with my Bougainvillea bonsai. So we didn't really pick any particular bonsai bush when I was at Bunnings, there were quite a lot of different plants. I was looking at a range of different fruit trees that they have, also a bunch of different conifers, a couple of junipers and a couple of Castellan golds that they had there. But I ended up getting the Bougainvillea Bonsai, and I've wanted a Bougainvillea for quite a while, especially given the really large one that they have at the Mount Cootha Botanical Gardens here in Brisbane. Really impressed me, so I wanted one of the same species of bonsai that I could grow myself. Now when you are developing a new bonsai out of a bougainvillea bush, they do need a lot of sunlight, so if you are only developing indoor bonsai, I definitely recommend you have a bonsai such as the ficus, which we have already gone over. Also some boxwood bonsai can be decent indoors, and a few other different varieties. But with the bougainvillea bonsai, you really need to make sure that the soil is relatively well draining. So you need a lot of sunlight, but you also need well draining soil, so you can water it, let it almost dry out, and then water it again and maintain that. So first things first, I'm going to take it out of its pot. I'm going to rake away some of the topsoil just to see what kind of nabari we have under here, or root structure we have. So what I'm going to use for this, because I don't have some of your more typical bonsai tools, is just a fork that I've turned into my own little bonsai rake. Can be a little bit vicious, but I tend to use it just lightly, just to make sure I'm not tearing away too many roots, and it definitely works. Now with the soil that they've got on this one, it's very loose. It really hasn't had an opportunity to get root bound in this pot. So I'm just going to take it all away. So you can see from this soil that they've really got a very barky potting mix. Just to give it that extra drainage, I suppose, and also a bit of extra nutrients. Okay, so I've raked off most of the loose soil around the main roots here. And you can see that they really must have taken a tube stock or something of the sorts and put it into this other pot, a deceivingly large pot. So there isn't really that much of a good root system there, but look, there is a little bit that I can start to develop into something later down the track. So what I'm going to need to do now is try and figure out what angle is going to be the best front. Now I want this to be a pretty small bonsai, so I think I'm going to have to do some pretty severe pruning to really bring down the size of the bonsai and make the taper in the trunk a lot more significant. Okay, so I think I'm going to go with this side here for the front for now, so I'm going to start my pruning. So I do have a set of proper curved pruners in the mail, but for some reason with COVID-19 on the way, they're expected to take another month for delivery, so I'm just using my common secateurs here. Now before I do proceed, just to make sure that the roots stay nice and moist and don't get too damaged from being left out, I'm just going to spray them quickly. Now I wasn't using Earth Choice cleaner product here. This is actually a bottle that's just been, well, rinsed out thoroughly and had just plain water added in. So I'm going to keep this first branch. Now it might end up being a sacrificial branch. I might need to remove it later on, but I'm definitely going to keep it there. I might be able to do something with it, and it'll really help in growing thicker as time passes. Once I remove these top branches, a bit more vigor is going to come down into this lower branch here. So I'll keep that for now. I'm also going to keep these slightly higher up branches too, just to see how they go. So now I need to decide where I'm going to cut off the main trunk. Now, as I don't want this to be too much of a big bonsai, I really only want it to be about this tall. You can see this branch which is kind of coming off on the side there, and I think I want to make that one my new leader. So I'll cut it off just above that, just to keep the branch nice and safe. And there you go. So I've cut off this whole big massive section here. I'm not sure what I'll do with this, but I'll definitely be throwing it into some water, just a bottle of water, just to sit for a while and wait and see if some roots grow out the bottom. Now, in order to propagate these, probably what I'll do is just cut them in a little bit of a diagonal shape, kind of like that there, and then I'll just scrape off some of the bark before I do put them into a bottle of water, just to really help with getting that sap flow up, and those roots can really start to germinate down the bottom there. So when you are trying to propagate cuttings, you do need to make sure that you pull off a lot of the leaves that you're about to grow the cuttings from the branch that you're growing it from, just so that there's not too much foliage that the branch is trying to keep alive, which will really take too much energy from that branch that you're trying to grow from a cutting, and it's just going to end up dying. So just leaving a couple of leaves is normally fine to get a little bit of photosynthesis in, but also make sure that there's not too much strain on the branch for it to actually live. So now that I've really reduced this back to almost the size that I do want for this bonsai, I'm going to put it into a pot and then perhaps style it a little bit from there. So I've got some really good nabari actually, starting to form. There's a root here which is starting to come out, and that'll look really nice later on as time develops, I think. So I'm going to keep that growing. But I do have this really big and kind of awkward root which goes all around in this really curved structure, which is where I think it must have been growing previously in a rootstock, and that's a really ugly root and will make it really hard for me to sit this properly in a pot. So I'm going to cut that off. Go. Now, Bougainvillea can also be propagated from a root cutting, so I'm not sure if this bit of root is realistically big enough for that, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. Worst comes to worst, nothing comes out of it. And I'm just going to trim some of these longer roots, which are really just starting to get a little bit insane. They'll then grow, and I really want to make sure that I really encourage these smaller roots in here to grow. So with having these really large roots going down like that, I really don't want all the energy from the tree going into growing those roots. So just going to cut these off. These ones which really taper out and might start to develop good nabari I'll keep. But this will be my my rootstock here. So I'll leave some of the soil attached to these roots. Some people do wash the roots of their new bonsais when they are growing it. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to take one stance or the other with that down the road, but for now I'm just going to keep some of the soil there. Washing it away can hurt the tree a little bit more. So now I'm going to need to figure out what kind of a pot I'm going to put this in. Now, I think that's going to look okay. ideally I'd be looking at a pot that's not glazed. This one is going to definitely be too big, I would say. Ideally I'd be looking at a pot that's not glazed, but I am kind of limited on the pot front at the moment. It does actually look quite nice. So when looking for a pot, it's really going to vary as to what you want, depending on the type of the tree, the kind of way that you're growing it. But initially what I'm going to do is grow it in a pot which is probably a little bit larger than what you would put it in for a fully grown bonsai, because I do want a little bit more growth out of it, and I'm not too fussed making sure it's the right bonsai for the pot for now, because it's really just the initial stages of this tree. So decided I'm going to put it in this pot. Now the main reason why I've gone with this pot as opposed to this pot is there's just that little bit of size difference, and I really want to make sure I put it into a pot that allows it to grow a lot more roots and get a lot more strength and a lot more thickness in its trunk over the next couple of years before I repot it again. So I'll be able to use those other pots that I have there for another tree down the track. So initially you make sure that your pot is washed, and then because it's got that massive hole in the bottom there, you're going to need to just plug that up with something. So you can use a lot of different things, fly mesh or something of the sorts, it's fine, you can just cut a bit out of that. But I've got this plaster tape which I've been using. It's nice and simple, you can just cut it. It's already a good width, so you don't need to worry about that. And the advantage of this is I already had it available anyway from fixing a hole in a wall, and because it's slightly sticky you can just stick it right on there. It's nothing fancy, but it's nice and simple, and you can just stick it on there, and once you put the soil on top it should keep nice and stable. Okay, so I've got some soil in my pot now. After putting the soil in the pot, what I'm doing now is I'm just using a chopstick to really make sure that that soil is in amongst those roots. So what I'm doing here, just because when I was filling around with the soil, the branch is really starting to tip over. So bush really starts to move around and tip over when I'm trying to just plant it into the center of the pot here. So I'm just getting a bit of wire, feeding it up from the bottom. just so that I can tie down my bonsai. So I'm going to try and tie this down just below where I'm going to have the top of the soil. Just so it doesn't get in the way of having the bonsai look good. There you go. So again, this soil mix is a mixture of pumice, which is that white stuff, vermiculite, which are those bits, ordinary potting soil mix, which has that bark you can see there, and also just a little bit of peat moss. So I'm just using this chopstick again now that the tree has been tied in, it's nice and stable. Just using these chopsticks to really get that soil in so there's no pockets of air. Now I don't want too much soil in here either. I really want to make sure that that soil is under the rim of the pot so that it can capture water when it's watered, drain in, so it doesn't just all flow off the edges. So that's the start. Now that it's been potted in both angles, but I really want to try and develop it just a little bit more than that. So I don't really have a lot more that I can do with this bonsai for now. I was considering perhaps using a couple wires and trying to get that going, but you can see it's already got a little bit of structure, and the branches that it does have there aren't really big enough or thick enough for me to really apply any wire to them. So I could, like, move that one down a little, move that one up a bit, but I think what I'm going to do is pretty much leave this as it is and really grow it from here. Now the only thing with that is you can see with the trunk here, the main trunk, it really kind of comes out and up like that. So it's kind of really thick all the way up, and I really want to send the structure of the trunk, the main leader trunk, back in towards the center, just to get a little bit of an S shape in the branch. So you can see here that that branch, where it starts to feed back in towards the center of the branch, just feeding in towards the middle there. So that really is developing the shape of the tree, which I really want, with that little bit of a curve in the trunk, which I think will look really cool down the track. But I'm kind of going to limit it to probably both of those branches there for now, just to see how that turns out. So I think I'm going to top off the top of this branch too, and just see how it goes from there. This one here might start to be the new leader, but I've kind of discussed how I want this one to be a bit of maybe a sacrificial branch anyway, so if it does turn into the new leader, that's not going to be too much of a problem. But I definitely want a lot more thickness coming from that little branch coming into the middle there, and I think if I leave the top of the bonsai here on that left side, then it's really going to not help in any way with how much thickness I'm getting in that branch coming back in, which I want to be the new leader. So I'm going to make another cut. So there you have it. You can see that new branch which is coming back in on the inside there, which I'm hoping to turn into the new leader. And from the front, and now this one here is starting to get just a little bit high, so I might just bring it all back to kind of a bit of a same height. So with the buds where they are above the leaves, I'm going to have new branches developing in the same way that these leaves here are pointing. So that'll be good just to get myself a little bit of structure in that branch if I do choose to keep this branch later on. It does actually come out at a good point, but it's definitely one that I need to really thicken out below here, as it almost seems to be a little bit of an inverse taper on this trunk. You can see it's a little bit thicker up here than it is down the very bottom. So this is this tree for now. It's got a lot of growing to do, but hopefully this will turn into a very nice bonsai. Thanks for watching. I do hope to develop a lot more videos like this in the future, so if you had enjoyed this video, just hit the like button, comment if there's any plants in particular that you would like me to do any videos on, or if you have any questions about the Bougainvillea or the ficus as I developed earlier, and subscribe if you are interested in more content such as this. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your day.